When I returned to the lakeside house I'd bought with my retirement savings, I never expected to find my son and his wife's entire family dividing up rooms and measuring as if the place belonged to them. They'd planned it all in advance, copying keys, changing my bank address, and spinning a selfish old man narrative on social media. I said nothing during the reconciliation dinner, just placed a file, a video, and a note on the table. Enough is enough. You won't believe what I did next, to reclaim my house and myself. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit like, and comment where you're watching from. Let me know what time it is where you are. The grocery bag slipped from my hand before my brain could process what my eyes were seeing. A jar of tomato sauce crashed onto the pristine white tile floor, shattering and splattering red streaks like blood at a crime scene. I froze at the threshold, keys still in hand, 3 heartbeats passing as my knees locked. The lakeside cottage I'd just bought, my first home, truly mine after 63 years living in my family's shadow, was no longer empty as I'd left it. No, now it was occupied. And not by just anyone but my son, Eli, his wife, Riley, and her entire family. Riley was crouched in the guest bedroom, tape measure around her neck, labeling spots. Jack's bed, Ellie's shelf, shared playroom. She worked as if moving into a new house they'd just signed a mortgage for. Outside the window, I saw Riley's father, Ronald, pointing at the lot by the garage, mouthing something about building a small woodworking shed. Inside, her mother, Patrice, was dusting my tea set, holding a potted orchid as if she'd lived here forever. No one noticed me until I stepped fully into the kitchen, feeling the squelch of my shoes in the tomato sauce. I'll ask again, what the hell are you doing in my house? I don't recall if my voice was low or high, only that the room fell deathly silent. Patrice turned first, smiling as if I were the uninvited guest. Raymond, you're back earlier than expected. I thought you were still in Vegas. Riley poked her head out from the hallway, holding a room layout chart like she was meeting with an interior design team. We just wanted to get things ready for a smooth transition. The kids are so excited. You know they need space. I turned to Eli, the only one yet to speak, and asked again, slower, colder. Who let you in here? Eli looked away, hands slipping into his pockets. An old habit when caught doing something wrong. Dad, Riley had a key. We just thought. I never gave anyone a key, I cut him off. And then it hit me. Last week, Riley stopped by, said she needed the bathroom. She left her purse in the living room. I even offered her tea. So that's how it happened. A cold sweat slid down my spine. I looked around my kitchen, the dining table I'd chosen each chair for, the lake painting I'd hung myself, now filled with things that weren't mine. The air reeked of floor cleaner and vanilla from Riley's scented candles. Familiar, but not mine. I didn't know if the lump in my throat was anger or an overwhelming sense of betrayal. But one thing I knew for sure, I bought this house for me. And no one, not even blood, had the right to invade it like I was already dead. We thought you were still in Vegas, Eli said from behind Riley, his voice small, unsure if he should continue. We just wanted to tidy up a bit, to make moving in easier later. Moving in. Those 2 words echoed like clanging metal in my head. I looked into my son's eyes, searching for something. Regret, unease, even fear, but all I saw was avoidance. Riley, though, was completely unfazed. She sat at my dining table, crafted from walnut I'd ordered, opened her laptop, and pulled up a room allocation file. The kids are so excited, she said. Ellie loves the room with the lake view, and Jack and Tyler will take the one next to it. We're turning your office into a study room. The ground floor room will be for my parents, so they don't have to climb stairs. I glanced down the hall. Sure enough, Ronald was measuring wall angles with a tape measure. Patrice was on a chair, swapping out the curtains I'd bought last week. These are too heavy, she said, shaking the fabric like it was outdated trash. I brought lighter ones from home. Kids need natural light. I swallowed hard. Who let you into my house? I asked for the second time. Riley had a key, Patrice replied casually. Eli said we needed to prepare before moving in. She said we, like I wasn't even part of the equation. I looked at Riley. She shrugged. Yeah, I have a key. Last time I visited, you remember, I left my purse in the living room when you went to make tea. No big deal, just thought I'd make a copy to save you the trouble later. I felt myself detach, like I was floating outside my body. When Riley used the bathroom, I'd offered her tea. She left her purse behind. I didn't think twice. Not a hint of suspicion. That was my mistake. Ronald approached, holding a list of contractors. I got some good cheap painting crews. This place would look better in bright beige. The kitchen counters might need raising a bit. Patrice thinks they're too low. He glanced over my shoulder, expecting agreement but not really caring if I responded. Patrice chimed in. We should schedule a professional carpet cleaning soon. The kids make messes, especially Jack with his sausage sauce. I stopped hearing individual words. It all blended into a white noise pounding in my ears. I turned to Eli. The only one I still hoped had some conscience. You really don't see anything wrong with this? He didn't look at me, just shook his head slightly. We thought you wouldn't want to live alone for long. This house is big. We're struggling. It's just temporary. I laughed, a dry, bitter laugh. Temporary, I gestured around. My sofa pushed against the window. Bookshelves cleared, fridge plastered with Riley's family schedule. Temporary, yet you're labeling rooms, hiring painters, assigning parking spots. Raymond, Patrice interjected. You're overreacting. This is family. Your son, your grandkids. We're family. Family. I'd heard that word my whole life. Family can take your things. Family doesn't need to ask. Family doesn't respect boundaries. But now, looking at them calmly invading my life with soft words, I understood. This wasn't help, it was control. They didn't ask because they didn't think I had the right to refuse. A suffocating pressure rose in my chest. I saw clearly that I was being reduced to a supporting character in my own story. I'll ask one last time, I said, voice low and slow. Who gave you the right to treat this house like it's yours? No one answered. Riley looked down. Eli stepped back. Patrice sighed as if tired of my unreasonable attitude. Ronald smacked his lips. Come on, Raymond, you're retired. Now's the time for comfort, not isolation. I said nothing more. I turned and walked to the door, each step dragging the weight of years spent yielding. I needed air. I needed to hear my own thoughts, and I needed to remember that I'd intended to start over, a quiet, private life for me. But if I didn't stand up now, I might lose every piece of this house. I didn't sleep that night. Though they left by dusk, Riley citing picking up the kids, Ronald mentioning car repairs, Patrice muttering, You should rethink this when you're clearer-headed. The air in the house felt thick like their presence lingered in every corner. I didn't eat dinner, didn't turn on the lights, just sat alone in my old armchair, staring at the front yard. One thought gnawed at me. This wasn't random. The next morning, a call from the bank came as I was brewing coffee. The woman's voice was polite, professional, but her first sentence nearly made me drop the glass pot. We've successfully updated the mailing address for Mr. Raymond Kaufman per the request submitted Tuesday. I frowned. What request? The request from Mr. Eli Kaufman, listed as your primary contact. I stood frozen in the kitchen, coffee steam in the air, but my stomach turned ice cold. Mail will now go to 1788 Maple Drive, Mr. Eli's old address, correct? The agent asked. No, I said, voice catching, not correct at all. I immediately called the account management team. After a round of identity verification, they confirmed someone had submitted a scanned ID in my name, blurry but accepted by the system because it matched account details. Mailing address, mortgage statements, and credit reports had been rerouted to Riley and Eli's address for nearly a week. We're sorry for the inconvenience, the representative said. We'll flag your account for security and only send mail per your instructions from now on. But I knew this wasn't just inconvenience, it was violation. A small step in a larger plan I hadn't fully seen. I hung up, hands still trembling. That evening, as I sifted through personal documents, house deed, bank statements, insurance contracts, my phone buzzed. A group message on Messenger, seemingly sent by Eli by mistake. It was short but enough to freeze my blood. Don't worry, Eli wrote, Dad will cool off like always, he won't make a fuss. The message was for Riley and Patrice, not me. I don't know how Eli misfired or if the app glitched, but those words glared from my screen. Confirmation of all my suspicions. They didn't see my reaction as a boundary to respect, just a temporary hurdle. They believed I'd cool off like always, but this time I wouldn't. I opened my laptop, created a folder named Evidence. I screenshot every message, saved them as PDFs. I backed up bank address access logs, noted dates, times, names of bank staff I spoke with. I removed every lock, front door, back door, garage, lakefront balcony, and replaced them with smart locks tied to codes and a remote app. I called a security company to install cameras that day, one on the porch, one at the back door, one in the living room, all with motion alerts and cloud storage. I set up notifications for any unusual movement. I no longer trusted trust. I no longer trusted blood. I only trusted data. Holding the deed, purchase receipts, and invoices for every piece of furniture, all paid with my 40 years of work. I realized if I didn't protect myself, no one would. Not Eli. Not his wife's family. No one. I didn't know what else they were planning. But I knew one thing. They saw my kindness as a license to invade, and I wouldn't let that happen again. That night, for the first time in weeks, I locked the doors, turned off the lights, and slept. Not because I felt safe, but because I was starting to reclaim control of my life. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. It was just the beginning. I woke to birds chirping by the lake and soft golden sunlight filtering through the new curtains, ones I'd chosen myself, no input, no directives, a morning that seemed peaceful, until I checked my phone. 12 new Facebook notifications, 2 messages from the neighbor across the street, and a strange next door alert about new neighbors moving in. I hadn't posted recently, Hadn't added new friends. But when I opened Facebook, the top post stopped my pulse for a beat. A public post by Patrice Monroe, Eli's mother-in-law, with a background photo of my 3 grandkids huddled on my living room's hardwood floor, coloring. Behind them was the gray wall I'd spent 3 weeks painting myself, my bookshelf still waiting for shelves. The caption read, "Finally, our family has a stable home, a house big enough for every generation. Thank God for this blessing." The last line had a praying hands emoji and family first. I couldn't breathe. Below were photos. Riley in my kitchen, holding a glass jar of cookies. Eli lifting Ellie on my new sofa. Ronald on the garage steps, coffee in hand like he was watching the house. Patrice smiling at the dining table, eyes smug. The final photo was a floor plan sketch of my cottage. I zoomed in on the corner. Handwritten notes. Parents' room, living room, kids' room. Everything decided, divided, prepared. My name nowhere. The comments weren't sparse. A friend of Patrice wrote, "So happy family together is the best." Another asked, "So the kids have their own rooms now?" Riley replied instantly, "Yep, Ellie gets the Lakeview room. The other 2 are by the kitchen. And me? Did I have a room in my own house?" I scrolled further, finding older posts. A week ago, Patrice shared a photo of Eli's pickup parked in my driveway, captioned, "New chapter, new home. Grateful for family love and sharing. Not a word about me, not a hint of permission. Just appropriation, dressed up as sacred family." I felt strangled. A message from Sharon, my left side neighbor, popped up. "Back already, Ray? Gorgeous house? Must be fun with the big family." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to type, "No, I didn't agree to this," but I let it sit. Everything felt like it was slipping from my grasp. My house, my life, my identity, rewritten on social media by others. I was a silent side character in their staged play. I quietly saved every post, screenshot every comment, archived every mention of new home, stability, generational bonding. I knew their words would be denied later, but evidence doesn't lie. I checked my social media accounts, changed passwords, revoked access from unknown devices. Part of me wanted to message Patrice, demand she take the post down, but I knew they'd spin it, paint me as petty, unsupportive of the kids' joy. I remembered Eli's look last night. No remorse, just unease at being caught early. I recalled Riley's shrug when I questioned the key, a shrug of someone certain I'd cave anyway. Humiliation flooded me, like an uninvited guest in my own space. I didn't know what I'd face next, but I knew one thing. If I didn't speak up, if I didn't set my boundaries, the whole community, people who once saw me as a model father, would only see me as a grumpy old man ruining his grandkids' happiness. And I wouldn't let that happen. Not again. Not now. I finished installing the camera system Monday morning, as mist still blanketed the lake and the electrician packed up. 6 cameras were strategically placed. Front entrance, side door, parking area, living room window, back hallway, and office window. I no longer trusted locks or anyone's self-respect in the group, steadily eroding my freedom. I didn't tell Eli. Gone were the days I needed my son's approval for anything in my own home. That afternoon, as I brewed coffee, my phone buzzed with a front yard motion alert. I opened the camera app and my heart skipped. The screen showed Patrice standing with a stranger in a locksmith uniform. She pointed at the new lock, saying something I couldn't hear, but her gestures were clear. The locksmith's face showed confusion. He opened his tool bag, pulled out equipment, then paused. I turned on the camera's mic just as he said, "I need to see the deed or lease in your name." Patrice gave a light laugh like she was humoring a grandchild. "My grandson's name is on the house. His father-in-law's just staying here." The locksmith didn't budge. "I need documentation." Patrice's face darkened. She called someone, likely Eli, then whispered something. But I only caught, "Why can't we do this faster? We have the old key." The locksmith shook his head, packed up and left, leaving Patrice standing, looking around, then quietly heading to her car. I barely recovered when, an hour later, the back door camera alerted again. This time it was Franklin, Riley's brother, crouching at the side door, fumbling with a huge keyring. His hands shook, eyes darting like a thief. I watched him try each key, cautious but impatient, then kick the step when none worked. He turned to Ronald, standing near the garage lot, gesturing like he was giving a property tour. Another stranger was nodding, filming the backyard with his phone. I zoomed in and heard clearly, "If we knock down that wall, we could extend it into a small workshop. Good for woodworking and display." Ronald nodded enthusiastically, like a businessman negotiating a land deal, not someone trespassing. That evening, I sat down, opened my laptop, and drafted an email. No calls, no texts, no "I'm disappointed" or "Why would you do this?" I attached the day's videos, Patrice with the locksmith, Franklin trying keys, Ronald touring the backyard. Subject line, "Warning, regarding trespass on private property." The message was brief. No one without written permission is allowed on this property. Next time, I will call the police. Everything is recorded. I sent it to 4 people: Eli, Riley, Patrice, and Ronald. Within 5 minutes, my phone buzzed. Eli. I didn't answer. A minute later, Riley called. Then Patrice. I silenced the ringer. Not one of them apologized via email or acknowledged crossing lines. Instead, 30 minutes later, a text from Eli appeared. We thought you'd understand. This is for the kids. I stared at the words for a long time. We, no longer just my son alone, but a collective. Some kind of family board of directors I'd never elected. Thought you'd understand, as if betraying my trust, copying my keys, tampering with locks, trying doors, bringing strangers to inspect my house. All of it was something I should understand. And for the kids? I love my grandkids. But since when did they become a justified excuse for adults to invade, exploit, and seize everything from someone else? I looked around my house, quiet, orderly, and finally truly mine, and realized what I was fighting wasn't just the overreach of a few family members. It was a silent culture, one where the elderly must step aside, where silence is taken as consent, where for the family becomes the excuse for every violation. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear, and I had a long-term plan. 3 days after I sent the warning video, a new message from Riley popped up at 3 p.m. We're inviting you for dinner tonight. Mom made your favorite grilled fish. I read it and left it unanswered. By 6 p.m., Eli's car pulled into my driveway. He stepped out, wearing a crisp shirt, holding a box of pastries. Dad, Riley really cooked. We just want to talk properly. I looked into his eyes, the eyes of the boy who once feared my scolding for breaking a glass. Now the eyes of a man who no longer asks, only informs. I grabbed my jacket, not for the pastries, not for the fish, but because I wanted to hear what card they'd play next. The dinner was meticulously arranged in their rented house, white tablecloth, glass plates, yellow daisies in the center. Patrice and Ronald were already seated, Riley bustling with water and plates. The 3 kids were in the next room, their laughter chirping as if nothing had happened. In front of me on the table was a large leather folder. Eli opened it as I pulled out my chair. We've thought a lot, he said. His voice softened like an insurance salesman. And we think this is the best solution for everyone. I didn't look at the grilled fish Riley placed down or the wine Ronald poured. I stared at the stack of documents being pulled out one by one. 5 houses, scattered around Spring Hill, minutes from the elementary school the kids attended. Each was printed in color, with handwritten notes in purple ink. Big backyard for the kids, private room for the Monroes, quiet reading room for Raymond. We thought, Patrice began, if we buy a bigger house together, you could transfer your loan to it. Still in your name, but the kids get space to play and the family can be closer. She smiled, her voice sweet as honey poured into a fool's ear. Sharing is caring. I picked up a document, pretending to read. The first house's price was triple that of my cottage. The second had a pool photo and a note, great for birthday parties. I didn't know whether to laugh or freeze. Ronald nodded, adding, you wouldn't have to do much. We've talked to the bank. They said if you agree in principle, the paperwork can be done in a week. Quick and easy. Patrice chimed in. And of course your room would be the biggest, with a balcony. Perfect for morning coffee. I said nothing, not a word. I just looked at them one by one, from the son I once trusted, to the daughter-in-law I babysat for in her early working days, to the Monroes who thanked me profusely last winter when I helped pay for their porch repairs. This so-called solution wasn't for me. It was to legitimize their takeover, to make me the official gateway to their dream of a big family, living in comfort, funded by me. I set the document down gently, then stood. The chair scraped with a sharp sound. Thank you for dinner, I said, my voice drier than I expected. But I won't be eating. Riley looked anxious. Dad, I grilled it just the way you like. I shook my head. I didn't come here to eat. Patrice leaned forward, urgent. Don't misunderstand. This is a good faith offer. I cut her off, still standing, eyes fixed on the table. This is my house, that cottage. No one has the right to discuss selling it, trading it, or modifying it, except me. Eli exhaled softly, as if disappointed. Ronald frowned. Patrice forced a smile. But you can't live alone forever, can you? Who'll care for you when you're sick? I gave a faint smile. Certainly not the people who copied my keys and brought a locksmith while I was away. I turned and left. Behind me was silence, a mix of anger, confusion, and new scheming. I knew they wouldn't stop here. But it no longer scared me, because I now saw everything clearly. This wasn't a family dinner. It was a negotiation, where I was the resource, the housing, the name on the deed, and I had never agreed to play that game. I left that dinner with a mind cold as steel. For 3 days after, my phone was suspiciously quiet, not trusting the silence. I checked the cameras, the mailbox, everything normal, until Saturday morning, when an old friend, Carlson, from the fishing club called. His voice was hesitant. Raymond, do you know your pictures online? I opened my laptop. Carlson's message included a GoFundMe link. I clicked, and my heart pounded like it was being squeezed. The title read, Help a 3-generation family find a stable home. The first photo was my cottage, the house I'd spent a year finding, mortgaging, fixing up with my own hands. The second was me, candidly shot in my front yard, picking up trash, shirt wrinkled, hair disheveled. Below it, the caption, Mr. Raymond Kaufman, the lonely father who refused to share his home with his grandchildren out of selfishness. Below was an introduction by Jocelyn, Riley's sister. My brother-in-law, Eli, is a devoted husband and exemplary father. Their family is trying to secure a permanent home for their 3 kids and grandparents, but they're being blocked by a blood relative who won't share the house he built with them. Words choked me. Lacking empathy, against family values, needs help from a loving community. In just hours, over $400 had been raised. Comments flooded in like a dam breaking. One wrote, God teaches us to love, not hoard. Another, hope Raymond realizes what truly matters. A woman named Loretta commented, praying his heart softens. I raised 6 grandkids in a 2-bedroom house. A man even left his number, offering the Monroes a cheap rental if that cruel grandfather doesn't change. I don't know how long I sat staring at the screen. My wrists trembled. Anger didn't cover it. This wasn't just an attack, it was a public trial, and I was the defendant, uninvited, voiceless. I reported it to GoFundMe, attaching my deed, camera photos, and a note from my lawyer friend Dave, who'd helped with the warning letter. I wrote, they're using my image without permission, falsely accusing me and deliberately harming my reputation. The platform responded, we'll review within 24 hours. That night I couldn't sleep. The kitchen light stayed on until 3 a.m. I read every comment like peeling back my own skin for them to see. I didn't know who among them were neighbors, old coworkers, or people who'd eaten at my backyard barbecues. I only knew one thing. They didn't ask my side before deciding who I was. The next morning, an email from GoFundMe arrived. The campaign has been removed for violating guidelines on image use and harmful content. I read it 3 times. It felt like winning a battle no one saw. No applause, no audience. But at least I still had my dignity. As I brewed coffee, a voicemail came through. A familiar deep voice. Ronald Monroe. He didn't mince words. Think you won, Kaufman. Taking down that campaign changes nothing. This whole town will know what kind of person you are. You won't live in peace. Don't forget you're in this community. Who will they side with? A lonely old man or a young family needing help? I listened to the full recording, then saved it to my evidence folder. I didn't reply. Didn't call back. Just stood by the sink, gripping my coffee mug, back straight like a taut guitar string. They'd played their final card. Public opinion. The community. The church. Prayers and pitying looks. They wanted me to bow out of fear of being hated, isolated, seen as heartless. But they forgot one thing. I'd lived through my hardest years, when my wife died, when Eli dropped out, when I worked triple shifts to keep our old house. I wasn't afraid of a small town whispering behind my back. I was only afraid of losing respect for myself, and that they'd never take. Monday morning, as I set my coffee mug on the desk, the secretary knocked. Mr. Kaufman, urgent call from family, she said softly, eyes worried. I picked up the office phone. Eli's voice came through, frantic like I was an ER doctor. Dad! Riley's mom fell down the stairs. Can you come help? She's in bad back pain. Ambulance isn't here yet. Before I could ask, he hung up. I left the office almost immediately, heart pounding, not out of worry for Patrice, but from a growing suspicion. 12 minutes later, I pulled up to the Monroe's house. The door was unlocked. I stepped in and the house was eerily quiet. No groans, no rushed footsteps, no one on the floor. Instead, I saw Patrice in athletic wear, pushing a cart full of groceries through the front door. In her hand were a French baguette, almond milk, and organic greens. Patrice froze when she saw me. Raymond? Why are you here? I didn't answer right away. She looked at me, then said, unblinking, I just went to the store. We ran out of olive oil. My back, well, it's a bit sore, probably slept wrong. She smiled. The kind of flimsy smile I'd seen all my life from people unaccustomed to accountability. I nodded, said nothing, just looked around, trying to grasp some normalcy. But everything had crossed far beyond the family script. They didn't just want my house. They were building an entire stage. That evening, the air turned cold. I was finalizing bank reports when the doorbell rang. I checked the camera. It was Pastor David, who'd preached at my wife's funeral, standing at my door with a Bible in hand. I opened it a crack, just enough for him to see my face. Pastor, I nodded. What's this about? Raymond, he said, voice low and mournful like he was at a funeral. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to pray for your heart to open. I kept my hand on the latch. He continued, family is God's gift. Riley and Eli are in crisis. Patrice is hurting, physically and spiritually. They need you. The kids need you. I beg you to open your heart, your door, and the gate to a shared home. I blinked, feeling like I was in some dogmatic play. I'm standing in my house, Pastor, I said. The only gate that needs closing is the one they're trying to break. He went silent. A second later, he whispered, I'll pray for you, and for this family. I nodded, closed the door gently but firmly. Then I turned off the doorbell, turned off the porch light, and sat on the sofa, where I could see out the window without being seen. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera app. I rewatched the morning's footage. Patrice stepping out of her SUV, walking steadily, no sign of injury. I saved it, then sent a copy to lawyer Dave with a note. This morning's performance. Near midnight, a message came from Eli's number. Dad, Riley cried all afternoon. She says you don't care about what the family's going through. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the liquor cabinet, poured a bit of old bourbon into a heavy-bottomed glass. I didn't drink. I just watched the liquid swirl, thinking of their every move from the copied key, the changed bank address, to the GoFundMe, and now a fake accident, a real pastor. They weren't just crossing boundaries, they were building a theology of my guilt. Me, the widowed retired father, who bought a small house for a peaceful final chapter. Suddenly the symbol of selfishness, the man defying God and innocent children. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. Clear as the LED glow of the night camera, shining straight into their schemes disguised as sermons. And that clarity was why I wouldn't back down. The next morning, I brewed coffee but didn't drink it. My mind wasn't on its gentle bitterness. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulling out the file I'd built over weeks. Bank statements, emails confirming the address change, mortgage payment records, screenshots of defamatory posts, Eli's misfired message, and camera footage of Patrice with the locksmith. Each a piece of evidence, each page a milestone in their slow, organized invasion. I called Dave, my old friend and retired lawyer who'd helped with my wife's death certificate. Now he was helping me prove I was still alive, literally and legally. I've gathered enough, I said when he picked up. I'm not mad at them for scheming. I'm mad at myself for letting it go on this long. There was a pause on the other end. Then Dave said, You've woken up, Raymond. That's the first step of any rebirth. We reviewed every detail. Dave was meticulous, like he was drafting a divorce. But this time it was a divorce from the web of ties called daughter-in-law's family. I signed each page of the legal warnings, prepared 3 letters, one for Eli and Riley, one for Ronald and Patrice, one for Pastor David's office. No more direct talks, no more explanations. From now on, I only wrote. I bolded the opening line. All communication from this point must be in writing. Any trespass, interference, impersonation, or pressure will be treated as systematic harassment. I didn't email them. I wanted them to hold the letters in their hands, to see the embossed seal, to hear the rip of the envelope. I went to the post office, sent them via certified mail with signature confirmation. In each envelope, I included a copy of the illegally duplicated key, camera footage of Ronald bringing a stranger to preview the garage lot, and a mortgage statement in my name, paid by me, unrelated to any Monroe. That evening, no uninvited guests came, no pastor, no grandkids calling to ask why Grandpa didn't love kids anymore. Just a message from Riley. Do you really think this is necessary? I didn't reply. A minute later, Eli added, I tried to be the bridge. Now everyone will think you're cruel. I gave a faint smile. In their world, I had no right to defend myself without being labeled a traitor. No right to keep what was mine without being called selfish. But I was tired of living in that framework. I wrote one final message, short and emotionless. All responses should go through my lawyer, Dave Pearson, at the address in the letter. Personal communication is no longer appropriate. I don't know how far they read, but I knew one thing. I wasn't writing for them. I was writing for myself, for the man who once stepped back in crowds to avoid trouble, who gave his son a key because it was what families do, who stayed silent during invasions out of fear his grandkids would think him stubborn. Now I wrote to draw a line. No more waiting to see what they do next. I would act. From that day, I switched all bank and insurance mail to online, double encrypted. I changed all email, retirement, and utility passwords. I bought a fireproof safe and placed it in my new office, now fitted with a fingerprint lock. By day's end, I printed 2 copies of the original mortgage, a detailed ledger of every payment I made while living with Eli and Riley, and the financial records from my wife's death, proving I alone paid for her funeral, hospital bills, and insurance, not a cent from the Monroes. I stored them in a thick binder, labeled No More Confusion. For the first time in weeks, I slept deeply. Not because I'd reclaimed my house, but because I'd begun to reclaim myself. And I knew from here on they wouldn't face the soft-hearted old man anymore. They'd meet a Raymond Kaufman I hadn't allowed to exist before, one who didn't just say no, but had documents, evidence, and the law backing that refusal. The invitation came through Eli. via text. The family's gathering at the Monroes is on Sunday, 5 p.m. We just want to talk calmly with you, Dad. Riley's making that stew you like. The tone was gentle, almost pleading, as if the past weeks were just a minor misunderstanding at a tense family gathering. I read the message 3 times, then set the phone down without replying. But I decided I'd go. I prepared like I was going to battle. The thick file went into a worn brown leather briefcase, its right corner frayed but the lock still solid. Inside was everything: bank statements, camera footage, lawyer's confirmation letter. I printed a separate cover page, bolded in large font. What really happened? When I arrived, cars packed the driveway. I recognized Riley's sister's minivan, Franklin's old pickup, and even Pastor David's SUV. The house glowed with light, laughter, and clinking cutlery echoing from the kitchen to the hallway. I stepped in, and every pair of eyes turned to me, a mix of surprise and relief, as if they'd been certain I wouldn't show. "Dad's here," Eli exclaimed, standing to pull out a chair for me. But I didn't sit. I opened the briefcase, placing it on the dining table set with steaming stew and buttered bread. "I'm not eating tonight," I said, voice calm. I came to set things straight once. The air tightened like a stretched wire. I opened the file, pulling out documents one by one. "This is the mortgage in my name, no one else's. These are monthly payment receipts, a bank letter confirming an unauthorized address change. These are video stills from the 14th. Patrice with a locksmith, Ronald trying multiple keys, and Franklin discussing a future workshop in my garage." I laid each sheet on the table, face up for all to see. No one touched their forks. I stayed silent too long, I continued. Not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to believe in people's good. But when family starts invading, exploiting, and spinning lies online, when I'm turned into a selfish old man who doesn't love his grandkids, while I'm the only one who never asked for a dime, silence stops being kind. It becomes complicity and wrong. The room was deathly still. Eli looked like he wanted to speak, but Patrice's glance stopped him. Riley bowed her head, fingers twisting her napkin. Then a voice spoke, small but firm. "If this is family," a young man, about 20, a Monroe cousin, stood up. "Why isn't anyone defending him?" The question hung like an invisible blade. No one answered. Patrice stared at her palms, silent. Riley turned to the window, avoiding my eyes. Pastor David pursed his lips, hands clasped as if praying, but said nothing. Eli, my son, the one I thought would bridge generations, just stared at the table, face flushed, hands trembling slightly. "We just thought," Franklin began, hesitating. "You're alone. The house is big and the kids are cramped." "I'm not alone because I'm lonely," I cut in. "I'm alone because I chose to be. And that house isn't a prize for those who know how to encroach. It's the last bit of peace I built with my own hands after a lifetime of work." I closed the briefcase, looking at each of them. "I don't need apologies. I need boundaries. And tonight, I'm not here to ask for acceptance. I'm here to say, from now on, I live by what I know is right." I turned and walked to the door. Behind me, Eli's chair shifted slightly, as if he meant to follow, then stilled. No one saw me out, no one held me back, no forced hugs, no promises of "we'll change." I stepped into the fading evening light, my head lighter, as if I'd shed a stone-heavy backpack I'd carried for years. I didn't know what they said behind my back that night. Who got angry, who cried, who blamed whom? But I knew one thing: I'd spoken the truth. And this time, I didn't need anyone's agreement to feel it was right. 3 days after that silent family meeting, there was an odd quiet. No texts from Eli, no missed calls from Riley, no accusations from Ronald, or plaintive tones from Patrice. Jocelyn's social media was blank. The GoFundMe gone. The sanctimonious words vanished like they'd never existed. I thought they might be waiting for me to cave, as always. But this time, I had nothing left to yield. I folded the file, placed it back in the old briefcase, and called my lawyer not to demand anything, just to say, "I've decided to leave." An email from the previous week sat in my inbox, subject line brief. "Interview invitation, technical manager, Boulder Science and Heritage Museum." I'd skimmed it and left it, not thinking I'd return to work. But now it glowed like an unexpected door. I replied, "I'm ready to start soon." The interview was over. Zoom. The museum director, Marianne, about 40, had bright eyes and a straightforward manner. When I shared my 30 years at an aerospace equipment firm, she smiled. "We don't need spaceships. We need someone who can keep the electrical systems and exhibit models from shorting out." I laughed and said, "I'm good at that." A week later, I signed the contract. Boulder was small, quiet, and Colorado's April highlands still chilly. I listed my house. It took 3 days to get a deposit from a young newlywed couple wanting a place to start over. I nodded at our first meeting. I know the feeling. The profit was enough to put a down payment on a small house on Boulder's eastern edge. Gray stone walls, red-tiled roof, a backyard big enough for a garden. Before moving in, I did 3 things. changed all the locks, installed security cameras, and hired a gardener to help turn the backyard into a plot for basil, tomatoes, and lavender. I didn't call Eli to tell him I'd moved, didn't text anyone in the Monroe family. I left my new address with my lawyer in case they tried formal contact, but otherwise no one knew where I was. For the first time in 3 months, I slept a full, deep sleep. No waking to car engines outside, no dreams of someone rifling through my living room, no 3 a.m. phone checks for new crises. I set my phone on the kitchen table, powered it off, and let it stay silent through a long night. The next morning, sunlight filtered through moss-green curtains I'd chosen, spilling onto a brown rug and a lone armchair by the window. I brewed a pot of Earl Grey, stood looking at the backyard, once just rocky soil, now marked with stakes for vegetable beds. I didn't know if the plants would thrive, but at least it was a plot I'd decided on. My first week in Boulder, I started at the museum on time, working with a 3-person tech team, all decades younger, but they respected me like I was the last barrier between them and a fried circuit board. A guy named Jamal often asked my advice on soldering joints, and a girl named Ruby brought me coffee every Thursday morning. I didn't tell them my past about the old house or the family that saw me as property. It wasn't necessary. Each evening after work, I came home, watered the garden, played classic jazz on the radio, and read a random library book. No coercive texts, no move closer for the kids' suggestions, no pressure to eat someone else's favorite dish and fake a smile. Here I could breathe and be still. I kept the old file, but instead of by my bedside, I locked it in a drawer, not to hide but to remind myself. I'd stepped out of that vortex, and I'd never go back. No one knew I was here, and strangely that brought me more peace than any apology ever could. My second month in Boulder, I still wasn't used to people calling my name without a title. In the old town, I was Eli's dad, the grandkids' grandpa, or Mr. Kaufman, Riley's father-in-law. My identity always trailed someone else, but here when Jamal called, "Raymond, can you check the exhibit floor fan?" I realized how long had it been since someone just called me by my name. My neighborhood sat on Boulder's eastern edge where people only waved if they meant it, not out of curiosity. My left neighbor Helen, a widow for over a decade, lived with 2 fat cats. The old man on the right, Timothy, made furniture in his garage but never drilled past 7 p.m. No one asked if I was married, had kids, or why I lived alone. They just nodded each morning, sometimes sent a jar of blueberry jam or a note, "Extra apple pie if you want some." I learned to live quietly without being lonely. At the museum, I managed a row of old kinetic models, giant gears from the last century, used to teach classical mechanics. I loved their steady clank during test runs, the way metal met metal without fanfare, never missing a beat. One afternoon, while tweaking a system, I heard Ruby's voice from the meeting room, shaky, interrupted. I walked in as the tech supervisor critiqued her idea for an energy-saving lighting system. His tone was sharp. "Sounds nice, but you're too green." Ruby lowered her head, about to gather her papers when I spoke. "I think she's onto something." The room turned to me. I didn't preach, just pointed to Ruby's diagram. "The current system loses too much at the transfer. I've seen this setup at my old Nevada plant. She's right, this change saves cost and power." The supervisor went quiet, then nodded slightly. Ruby exhaled in relief. That evening, she left a box of homemade cookies on my desk and walked away. I opened it to find a small note. "Thanks for having my back. It means more than you know." I folded the note, tucked it into my coat pocket. A small gesture, but to me it mirrored the person I'd always wanted to be. One unbound by roles, not weighed by others' forced gratitude. Each morning I watered the backyard with rainwater collected from the roof. The tomato beds were flowering, basil grew lush, and lavender's scent wafted through the kitchen window. Once Helen visited, sniffed the air, and laughed. "Smells like the old cafe I worked at as a kid." "Mr. Kaufman, I think you've opened your own little shop." I smiled. "I'm learning to live like a cafe. Small, private, and no one books a table for someone else." One Friday evening, I sat in the kitchen, one hand on an old book, the other on a cooling tea mug. No text alerts. No move for the grandkids' hints. No pressure to do what's right because others say so. I was no longer Raymond, Eli's dad called when needed, forgotten when done. I was just Raymond. No title needed. No need to prove anything to anyone else. And strangely, that was more fulfilling than anything I'd ever had. I sat at the desk in the small room off the kitchen, early light filtering through white curtains, illuminating a stack of papers I'd rewritten several times that week. The final letter, not to cling, not to preach, just to close a door with words before I locked it with action. "Eli," I wrote, "this isn't blame nor forgiveness. You won't see me angry nor inviting you back. This is just a goodbye from someone who was once your father." I paused, picturing his 8-year-old face, backpack slung over one shoulder, grinning wide over his first A in math. That day, I'd promised to always shield him from life's unfairness. But I hadn't foreseen that the first person I'd need to defend myself from would be him, grown up siding with others, turning his father into a convenient shelter. I continued, "You thought I'd soften, like always. And yes, I did, too many times. I yielded, bit my tongue, stayed silent to keep family peace. But a house can't stand if people keep unlocking it behind the owner's back. Just as a relationship can't last if one person holds the door while the other sneaks in." I didn't mention the GoFundMe, Patrice's fake fall, the dinner with new house proposals, or the calls interrupting my work. The events spoke for themselves. I only wrote, "I wish you well to raise the kids kindly but without needing me anymore. I've moved, and I haven't left any keys behind." I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and wrote just 2 words on it: Eli Kaufman. I took a small wooden box from the closet out to the garden where I'd dug the lavender bed last week. Inside were 7 keys. 1 I'd given Eli, 1 Riley took when visiting with the kids, 3 I found copied when changing locks, 1 in Ronald's forgotten coat pocket, and the last, the only original, worn to a smooth edge. I piled them onto dry firewood. The smell of wood, burning metal, and young lavender mixed into something not pleasant but freeing. As the last bits of metal curled into red embers, I opened my journal and wrote one final line: "A house is only a home when no one else holds the key." I closed the journal, placed it in a drawer, unlocked. Privacy was no longer something I had to fight for. It was the natural state of my new life. That afternoon, I sat on the back porch sipping strong black coffee, no sugar. Helen sent over a small basket of peaches with a note: "Not too sweet, but real, like you." I laughed. It was perhaps the sincerest compliment I'd ever gotten from someone without the Kaufman name. On my phone, a text came from an old number. "Dad, if you read this, can we just talk? Just talk." I didn't reply, didn't delete it, but didn't respond. I wasn't angry anymore, nor hopeful. I just kept my silence, like a thin shield between my palm and the flame. That night I went to bed early, no nightlight, no phone by my pillow. I didn't dream, and to me that was absolute relief. Raymond Kaufman, 63 years old. No longer someone's father, no longer a placeholder for others, just a man living in a house he chose, with a door he locked himself, and a life finally unclaimed. Raymond Kaufman's story isn't just a personal family tragedy, it reflects a pervasive social issue in America today. Personal boundaries increasingly violated by those closest to us. In a culture that exalts family first, many, especially the elderly, retired, or living alone, are exploited for their kindness, weighed down by moral obligations, and gradually lose control of their own lives. Raymond symbolizes thousands of grandparents, parents, who after a lifetime of giving are treated as means, a house, a mortgage, a convenient space for others. The biggest lesson from this story is love doesn't mean unconditional self-sacrifice. Raymond's actions, changing locks, gathering evidence, hiring a lawyer, and ultimately leaving, weren't ungrateful. They were how he reestablished his self-worth. When he said, "I'm not mad at them for scheming, I'm mad at myself for letting it go on so long," it's a wake-up call for those trapped between family duty and personal freedom. In today's America, where individuality and autonomy are foundational, we must learn to say no, not out of selfishness, but for mental health and self-respect. Compassion has limits. Boundaries shouldn't be negotiated. Like Raymond, sometimes you must lock the door to keep your heart whole. If you've ever felt diminished in your own home, hit subscribe to catch more stories of autonomy and awakening. Thank you for joining Raymond's journey. See you in the next video with another tale of courage and resolve.